We make a lot of magic buses in Canada, and with a few tweaks, poof, so many jobs. There's already as many jobs in clean transportation as there are in our standard auto industry, and we need to double capacity ASAP to keep up with the demand. Part of that fleet will need hydrogen, production plants and pipelines, and oil workers to run them. So we also talk to the guys building both. And we hear from the nice lady who wants to sell us used cars, so long as they're electric. So many jobs, so much opportunity for Canada. So hop on and hear all about our magic buses from Canada's leading experts on the subject. Hi there. Welcome to the Clean50 CleanReset webcast series. I'm your host, Gavin Pitchford, the CEO of Delta Management Group and also the Executive Director of the Canada's Clean50 Awards organization. Delta's 28 years old. Today, we're the only executive search firm in Canada whose practice is now devoted exclusively to green professionals. Our typical mandates include Chief Sustainable Development Officers, ESG analysts, clean tech CEOs, smart building strategy experts, or environmental NGO leaders. As we launched this then new area of practice some 10 years ago, we became aware of two things. First, that solving climate change was going to take insight and ideas from every single corner of the economy. And second, that sustainability leaders in different silos were simply not engaging with each other as they needed to be. So to meet that need, we founded the Canada's Clean50 Awards program. And every year since, we've identified, recognized, and most importantly, connected 50 individual leaders, 10 emerging leaders, and the project managers from the top 20 sustainability projects across the country and from every possible segment of the economy. Each year, we bring all of these new honorees together at the annual Clean50 Summit. We connect them with each other and also with our existing Clean50 members. We now have some 600 amazing people who have won Clean50 awards for their impact in fighting climate change. They range from the CEOs and senior executives of organizations like Loblaw, HP, and Unilever, to brilliant R&D scientists, and to entrepreneurs you've never heard of, toiling away at small business and labs and universities across the country. Today, we're presented with the COVID-19 crisis. Typically, when crises hit, governments push panic buttons and jump on any project to create jobs, as long as it's shovel-ready. We build a bridge here, an extra line of highway there, and soon after, the jobs go away. The problem with that approach is that it's incredibly short-sighted and at best a temporary fix. What we need to do instead is to have a clean reset strategy, shovel-ready and shovel-worthy, projects to rebuild Canada's economy and do so with durable long-term jobs in strategic industries. How? By focusing on investing in the low-carbon economy, one that can grow and prosper as climate change increasingly impacts the entire globe. Climate solutions alone are expected to be a $26 trillion opportunity over the next 9 years, and Canada can get its share. But to do so, we need to decide right now if we want to be one of the suppliers or build another lane of highway and become the buyers of those solutions. For every $1 million our government invests in the dying fossil fuel extraction industry, we get just 2.7 jobs. But done right, an investment in just about any part of the low carbon economy generates between 3 and 5 times that number, and as many as nearly 10 times that number. Between 7 and 20 odd jobs per $1 million of investment, depending upon the industry segment. Best of all, a lot of that investment is just that, an investment, money that will be repaid or recouped by taxpayers, not swallowed up because some Saudi-based oil sheikh or the Russian oligarch decided to bump production and push down oil prices to a number that puts Canada out of business. When the COVID crisis hit, about 100 of our members immediately recognized we had this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that when we reset, that when we use that incoming government impetus spending, we could do so to set Canada on a clear path to a more prosperous future where we export our brainpower instead of our resources. 58% of Canadians support that idea. This group of industry experts spent several weeks working on a plan as to how we might best invest government stimulus spending to expand our low carbon economy. And then on Earth Day, we put that plan forward in a letter to the government, ultimately signed by over 220 members of the Clean50, 170 of their employers, ranging from multinationals like HP Canada and Unilever to small, medium enterprises. Another 35 organizations, including the Green Party of Canada and the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, immediately endorsed the plan. The latter said our plan wouldn't just create jobs, it would save lives and cut government health costs. And now, via a series of web and podcasts, we're bringing together expert panels to discuss various elements of our Clean Reset plan and discuss the ways in which our proposals can help Canada rebuild with a low carbon economy and millions of future-proof and durable jobs. Welcome to the Clean50 panel on clean transportation in Canada. We have a remarkable opportunity in front of us to make our transportation systems across the country cleaner by electrification using hydrogen and EV charging stations. And we have a group of people with us here today that are just absolutely experts in this field. Josipa Petrunic is the president and CEO of Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, CUTRIC for short. She's leading the formulation of several national transportation technology trials related to zero-emission transportation and smart vehicles innovation. Josipa has built up CUTRIC's consortium to include more than 100 private and public sector companies and organizations across Canada. Josipa, you probably know more about the current state of the nation on low-emission vehicle-based transportation in Canada than any other single individual in the country. Can you give us a current lay of the land when it comes to the public transit side of that equation? First off, who's playing? Do we have manufacturers, operators, third party?
Well, thanks so much, Gavin. And I think we've just got a great group of people here today that can add even additional insights to what I'm about to say. But if I were to speak to the state of the nation in terms of electric transit and electric busing, really what we're talking about is the electrification of heavy-duty powertrains and heavy-duty platforms. And where you electrify buses, you electrify trucks. So if we're asking ourselves, where are we at as a nation compared to other global jurisdictions, Canada, from an adoption standpoint, is not the world's leader right now. If we're looking at where's the world leading in integration trials where you put together a lot of buses with new technology, Europe is the leader and has been for a couple years. If we're just looking straight up at numbers, who's gotten the most number of buses out the door, several hundreds and into the thousands, that's China. But happily, Canada's not a laggard either. We are safely in the middle of the pack right now. We could do a lot better, and we were on the pathway of doing better pre-COVID. So what do we mean by we're in the middle of the pack? Well, Canada is a leader worldwide in adopting electric buses based on local city-led initiatives. Most of the world has adopted electric buses because of top-down requirements by state or regional level governments or federal governments. So whether that's China or the European Union initiatives, or that's even in California from a state level, adoption of electric buses has mostly been top-down. Canada is unique in that our adoption of electric buses has been organic, bottom-up, by city-led initiatives. That is a championship position to develop on, because it means cities are declaring climate emergencies in this country, and then they are acting on local commitments to emissions reductions by electrifying their transit fleet first in order to save taxpayer dollars. That's a very sustainable model. It's sustainable because people don't react to it negatively. It's seen as organic and local and community-based. So in terms of where we are as a nation, quantitatively, not the world's leaders necessarily, but qualitatively, we are certainly a leader worldwide in terms of the philosophy of making electrification an organic community-led initiative. So where are we in terms of actual quantity? Well, we are just at the beginning. Right now, we have fewer than 100 electric buses actually operating or just being delivered. And by just being delivered, I mean as of June 30th. We'll have fewer than 100 electric buses in Canada, but within within the next 12 months, we will have nearing 400 buses that are on order. So they're either on the road or they're somewhere in the assembly pipeline, or they're just coming out for commissioning to cities. Some of the big cities obviously lead that. We have TransLink in Vancouver as a region leading. We have BC Transit, Calgary, Winnipeg, Brampton, Burlington, York Region, Guelph, London, Laval, Quebec City. So these kinds of cities and regions are leading in the procurement right now over the next 12-month period. But in terms of who has led the deployment, it really comes down to the big three: Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Edmonton. So those four cities combined have really led the way in getting to that 100 electric bus deployment with their larger initiatives. It is far off from the 5,000 electric bus goal that the federal government under Minister McKenna has established for us. In order to get to 5,000 electric buses by 2024, 2025, we really need 10 times the number of procurements starting in the next 12 months. Because of the length it takes to manufacture these things, get them out, commission them, and actually integrate them into charging systems and facilities, starting 2021, by 2022, we really need thousands of buses in the procurement cycle in order for them to actually be delivered by 2024. It's doable, but it takes a whole set of partnerships between the transit agency, the utilities, and the manufacturers.
Josipa, thank you. That covers the deployment. Now, how about the manufacturers in this space?
From a manufacturing standpoint, we are definitely a North American leader. It is our game to lose. In other words, if you take a look at who is making electric buses in North America, they're Canadian companies. And who is making the powertrain components? They're Canadian companies. So we have New Flyer based in Winnipeg. They also co-own, as part of New Flyer Group, MCI, or Motor Coach Industry, which now makes electric coaches. New Flyer makes the only hydrogen fuel cell buses available for sale or procurement in Canada. They make some of the largest numbers of electric buses available in Canada. And they, of course, have a partnership with Motor Coach Industries, which is now making electric coaches. Based in Winnipeg, lots of jobs there. You look at Nova Bus, which is part of Volvo Group internationally. Well, Volvo Bus is making electric buses with very high Canadian content in Quebec, in Saint-Eustache, Quebec. And allied to them is Prevost, which is the coach bus manufacturer under Volvo. And they are making not only hybrids, but moving to full electric coach manufacturing in Quebec. So you have the powertrain and the manufacturer innovators of the vehicle. Then look at the powertrain components. Of course, we have Ballard based in British Columbia, and I know some of my colleagues today are going to speak about that. They make some of the core components, in particular the fuel cell stack, on the vast majority of hydrogen fuel cell buses already sold in North America. Then out in Ontario, we have Hydrogenics, which also makes fuel cell stacks, now bought out by Cummins, which is a world leader in diesel engines. You can see the writing on the wall. This is a huge growth opportunity for Hydrogenics based in Mississauga. And if you look a little bit down lower, you've got a whole host of small to mid-size enterprises. eCamion, Electrovia, Add Energy, TM4, which has now been bought out by Dana. Lots of companies making motors or batteries or battery management systems. They are located in Canada. And so we've got a great platform to develop an industrial scale innovation program in this country for jobs allied to the manufacture of electric buses, hydrogen fuel cell electric buses, the component parts, and we happily have a clientele that's growing, that's city-led, motivated by city-led emergencies to deploy these vehicle systems and their component parts in Canada. Lastly, I would just add that on the charging side, electric buses take really high, heavy-duty, high-power charging systems. You need to start at 300 kilowatts up to 450 into the 1 megawatt zone. When you're in that range, it's a specialized number of companies in the world that offer that kind of standardized technology. Happily, two of the global players, ABB and Siemens, have large footprints on e-mobility and their charging systems here in Canada, in Montreal and in Oakville. So it really is our game to lose right now. We have the manufacturing capacity. We have enough demonstration trials that are leading the world in terms of standardization and deployment that is city-led. And we have hundreds of buses being lined up right now by cities from west to east, north to south, looking for procurements. Add to that the fact we have a federal government that's trying to motivate cities to get to an even higher goal, a 10-time factor. And we really have all the makings for being a world leader in the manufacture, design, deployment, and integration of electric buses.
So that's really exciting, Josipa, that Canada has such an opportunity here. But these vehicles need charging infrastructure. Where are we there?
I know some of my colleagues here today are going to talk about utility innovation. We have a burgeoning opportunity around utilities in heavy-duty electrification. But needless to say, we were behind in the last 5 years in terms of utilities being out front for transit electrification. We're now moving forward with some core players like BC Hydro, Manitoba Hydro, Hydro-Quebec, Ontario Power Generation. They are moving forward, and some of the smaller ones, Newmarket Tay Power Distribution, Toronto Hydro, some of these smaller players who are now moving forward with electrification strategies for transit because it's in their backyard.
Wow. That's a comprehensive review, and startling to understand that there's just that much going on. I have one technical question first. Can you tell me the difference between a coach and a bus?
The difference between a transit bus and a coach bus is what most people would understand to be the difference between a TTC bus or a Calgary Transit bus that you get on and a Greyhound bus. So that's typically the difference from an electrification standpoint. Transit buses are easier to electrify. They don't go as far in terms of distances. They don't carry as many people at the highest speeds. Coach buses, harder to electrify. They go further distances. They're much heavier and they need space for luggage. So a little bit more difficult from a design perspective.
What's the opportunity for Canada right now, both in terms of emissions control and also in terms of the number of jobs that we have now and the number of jobs that we should have if we're driving this towards the goal that Minister McKenna said?
From an emission standpoint, I mean, the only reason we're all electrifying is to save the planet and save the world. So it's really important to know, like, how much are we going to save? If you look at transit on its own, transit's a very small piece of the pie. While every vehicle, every diesel vehicle is itself not highly efficient, when you add it up and you add the number of people moving, it's not that huge of an emission savings. It's about 1 megaton compared to 172 megatons across the country that we have to reduce. But the thing about transit is when you electrify transit and you create that high-power charging system, those high-power charging systems help to electrify trucks. And trucks are about 40 megatons of the overall piece of the pie. And so that means about 25% of Canada's emissions total. And so electrifying transit is the segue to electrifying trucks. It's the same infrastructure that cities need to deploy. And so that leads to approximately 25% emissions reduction opportunity from the heavy duty sector. If we take a look at sales, just pure sales, take a look at how many transit buses are out on the road right now. There's about 15,000 transit buses and coach buses in Canada. Given that each bus on its own and coach bus is about $1 million to $2 million, depending on the size and the technology and the range, you're really talking about $15 to $30 billion in sales just from the vehicle, not even the energy storage, not the charging systems, not the installation. So about $15 to $30 billion market opportunity for those manufacturers and integrators that can sell into that marketplace that is opening up right now, just in Canada. And of course, all of these companies sell across the north-south border. In terms of the post-NAFTA world, you're really talking about dozens of billions of dollars of opportunity in the United States for the exact same systems. So it's a huge market opportunity for Canadian companies, and it's a large market opportunity just in Canada alone. In terms of how many jobs, you're really looking at bolstering the transit sector, plus the fact that a lot of this technology transitions into rail. You'll be bolstering the rail sector in terms of rail electrification. And of course, utilities are involved there. So if you just look at transit, rail, and utilities that are involved in the electrification of public transit systems, you're already looking at 200,000 jobs in Canada today that would be maintained or grown by virtue of modernizing the transit system in this country. If we just look at the private sector and we look specifically at some of the core companies involved in the manufacture and design of these parts, so companies like Novabus and New Flyer, ABB and Siemens, and some of the other ones I mentioned, including Bombardier Transport and Ballard and Hydrogenics, you're already over 30,000 jobs just from about 12 companies in our CUTRIC membership consortium, specifically designing particular component parts. If we add up all of the SMEs and all of the other manufacturers like the tier ones, Linamar, Magna, that are starting to play in the space, you're talking about dozens of tens of thousands of jobs. So it's a large sector and it's growing. And given that this country has always focused, let's say by comparison, on the hundreds of thousands of jobs in the auto sector, this clean tech, electric transit, electric heavy duty transportation sector is nearing and paralleling the jobs in the traditional auto sector. That's huge for the Canadian economy.
How does that grow? Minister McKenna said 5,000 electric buses, where it's sitting at 100 at the moment. So I think that's 4,900 to go, give or take. Does that require these companies to scale up? in order to meet that goal?
It really does. If everybody ordered 5,000 electric buses right now, it wouldn't be possible to manufacture. If all the transit agencies in Canada, each one of which there's about 200, if each one ordered just 10 electric buses right now, it would not be possible to manufacture them and deliver them within a 2-year period. So that gives you a sense of the scale up. Now, even without this, at the current market level of say 15,000 electric buses, every year a certain portion of diesel buses or hybrid buses are renewed, right? So transit agencies in Canada generally overhaul their fleet every 12 to 18 years. So that means every 12 to 18 years, or in the years in between, a portion of a transit agency will be overhauled. If you just look at what gets overhauled every year, which is several hundreds of buses by transit agencies today, that already leads to a 1-year manufacturing timeline. So already today, just with the normal demand for overhauling of buses and normal new orders of diesels and CNGs and hybrids, it's already about 12 months from the time you press order and sign the documents to the time you get the bus as a transit agency. Imagine now the ramp up required to manufacture entirely new powertrains. Our manufacturers are going to have to ramp up and expand jobs necessarily. That is the job growth potential at the core level of the manufacturing shop floor.
So we're talking tens of thousands.
Absolutely.
Got it. Are we talking hundreds of thousands?
Well, in terms of jobs or buses?
Jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're talking at just the manufacturing level, you're talking about tens of thousands of jobs retained or grown. And I have to reemphasize the retention. If our manufacturers are not designing and manufacturing more electric buses, but the worldwide economy, in particular the United States and especially California, are going to electric buses, it's not just about growing new jobs, it's about retaining existing manufacturing jobs around diesel powertrains that will be lost because they won't be needed because nobody's ordering that stuff anymore. So we're talking about tens of thousands on the manufacturing shop floor. But if we're talking about the whole system, making the bus, integrating it with chargers, designing and making the chargers, integrating the chargers with energy storage, designing and making the energy storage devices, creating the software controls to connect them all in smart control nature, and then having fee-for-service based utility services or other third-party services to maintain and operate all of this electrical equipment that cities are not set up to maintain unless they have LRTs or subways. All of that, we're certainly looking at, we expect at CUTRIC, we're looking in the 100,000 above mark for new types of jobs that have to be created in the next 5 to 10 years just in this space.
Got it. Okay. I have one final question, looking for a pretty short answer. What's the total cost of ownership of these buses compared to the traditional diesel fleet?
Yeah, so it's very dependent on their usage. And I say that because, with diesel and compressed natural gas, you get relatively low price point per passenger, regardless of how inefficient you are as a system in deploying the vehicle, just because of the cheapness of petroleum products. But when you take a look at electric buses compared to diesel or natural gas, there is across the board an immediate savings in operations. Depending on your usage, you could see anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 saved per year per bus over the diesel or natural gas comparative model. The more you ride the bus, the more you pack people onto the bus, the more the bus is allocated to stop-start conditions that are really rugged on a diesel engine or a natural gas engine, the more you save. So if you use those efficiencies to your benefit, you can save hundreds of thousands of dollars per route per year by transit agency. And that starts to offset the cost of the capital investment, the chargers and the buses. If, however, you take the electric bus or the hydrogen fuel cell bus and you allocate it to routes and blocks that don't have a lot of riders, are traveling at constant speeds where diesel engines and CNG engines do relatively well from a thermodynamic perspective, then you're not going to see the savings that you would in that stop-start, rugged, heavy ridership condition.
Thank you, Josipa, for all of that. We're going to turn a little bit to, we've dealt with the public, now we're going to deal more with the private transportation. A lot of the ability to transport or to transition to low emission vehicles in both public and private transportation requires on the ability to refuel overnight if an electric vehicle and almost instantly if a hydrogen powered vehicle is used. In Canada, we've got a hotbed of activity in the sector that's growing in the Vancouver area, and we have two of the pioneering entrepreneurs who are finding ways to get solutions enabled with us today. I want to introduce Colin Armstrong and Jürgen Puter. Colin is the founder of Hydrogen Technology and Energy Corporation, HTEC. He's led the company since 2012. He's got more than 30 years experience working in the hydrogen sector, and he's the driving force behind the company and the development of British Columbia's hydrogen station network. HTEC opened Canada's first retail hydrogen station in 2018, something we recognized as a Clean50 top project last year. Colin's also been on the board of the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association for the last 9 years. Jürgen is a serial entrepreneur, and I never use this word to describe anybody, but I'm going to make an exception here. He's also a visionary. He started companies, taken them public, and lots of them, and most recently founded Aeolus Wind Power and Blue Fuel Energy. For 10 years, he served on the board of SDTC, 5 of those as chairman, and most recently, in 2018, he founded Renewable Hydrogen Canada. The company is using low-cost wind energy from Aeolus wind sites as the primary energy source for the production of renewable hydrogen on a globally significant scale. The first project, Sundance Hydrogen, has developed in partnership with FortisBC and Macquarie, will be over 150 megawatts, with the residual energy from the electrolysis being used to heat large-scale First Nation-owned greenhouses under the Sundance produce brand. In short, we've got 2 of Canada's leading hydrogen and clean fuel experts sharing some insights tonight. I want to start with, first of all, some really basic questions of Colin for those like me who don't know much about hydrogen-powered vehicles. Take me through it, Colin. Where can hydrogen be used? Is it as safe as gasoline? And what's the deal in BC for consumers?
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. Very pleased to be part of this panel. So, as I said, I've been in hydrogen for a long time here. It's been very interesting to understand the evolution of it. So, people ask a lot, why is it taken so long? Basically, one of the factors is the safety side of it. There's been codes and standards in the industrial world for a long time, and hydrogen is used globally very safely, but took a long time to translate that into the public realm. You know, when you have people driving up and operating hydrogen on a daily basis, it took a couple cycles to go through that. So that's happened now on the fueling side. On the vehicle side, there's also been a huge evolution of bringing the cost down. The costs of the fuel cell stack has dropped, similar to the solar panel side of things. So on the availability of vehicles, it's important to understand the status of commercialization. So really leading the game, strangely enough, has got nothing to do with clean tech per se. Forklifts are being changed over at the big warehouses that Costco and Amazon have. And these are running 24/7. And there's 40,000 of those now operating in the US. And that's driven a lot of demand and a lot of increased commercialization. So that's important to recognize. Those are fully commercial now. There's a value proposition. And they say the big companies are buying into it in a big way. Next, I would say, is the car, the passenger car. So Toyota, Hyundai, Honda have vehicles on the road. They're in the order of magnitude of about 12 to 15,000 and ramping up to production this year of about 30,000 or 40,000 total capacity globally. So those cars, they have the performance. The cost is coming down as they ramp up volume and evolve things. They're still a bit pricier. There's comparable to a battery electric car on a range. You don't really talk about the range so much in the hydrogen fuel cell cars. They're the same as gasoline. You fill up in a matter of 3 to 5 minutes. Same with the forklifts. That was the driver. It's a 2-minute fill in the forklift. The next evolution is the bus. They really became commercially viable last year. It was demonstrations for 10 years. I was involved in the 20 buses at Whistler back in 2008, 2010. There's lots to learn, but now these buses have gone 3 million miles kind of thing on proven stacks, and they've eliminated the degradation that they saw earlier on. So buses as in the transit world are now available, and performance is understood. The cost is pretty reasonable. The next that's coming on very strong for reasons talked about on the greenhouse gas is the heavy duty trucks, but they're further behind on the commercialization things. But a lot of the learning is getting wrapped into that. There's sort of this saying that cars and forklifts will bring down the price of the fuel cells because of the high volume, and trucks and buses will bring down the cost of the hydrogen. So as the trucks evolve, there'll be a huge demand in a lot of different applications, light duty, long haul. And then you're starting to see a lot of talk about trains and a lot of talk about marine applications with hydrogen as well. But that's sort of the sequence of evolution and availability of vehicles. So we as a company really follow that very closely, because that all creates different demands for fueling infrastructure. So, for example, we are doing, there's 2 heavy-duty trucks being demonstrated on an Alberta project called Azatec, and they need a demonstration station, the first one to fill a truck with 100 kilograms, proven in the tough conditions of Edmonton winters. So that's a different application than the light-duty. So in British Columbia and in California and in Quebec, where we have light duty stations, the demand is from the consumer side of things, driven by the need for the likes of Toyota and others to sell zero emission vehicles under the various mandates. And that's a high reliability, available 24/7, really quick, clean type of application. So the train and marine are quite different. The forklift are quite different. So, but fundamentally, coming down to the hydrogen supply side of things, there's a lot of work globally going on to figure out how to do 2 things: scale things up to large volume for the transportation markets, as well as greening that supply. So we're heavily involved in the 3 elements of the hydrogen supply, which is production, distribution, and then the fueling station side of it.
You're creating lots of hydrogen. How do we get it to market?
Very good question. You see, the key issue we see is not hydrogen or technology in itself. To make hydrogen is well-known technology since 100 years. To use it with fuel cells, well-known, Ballard has been around for a while. The problem has always been twofold. 1, transporting and storing hydrogen, and then 2, get the cost into an affordable range. So we're trying to attack it by using the natural resources we have in Canada here and in abundance. Here on the West Coast in particular, we have wind resources that are above most anything else anywhere in the world. For example, offshore wind farms in Europe are sort of the core how the future of hydrogen supply is being envisioned, to use offshore wind farms. They get maybe 40 to 45% capacity factor. Here in BC, we have wind farms that are over 50 actually running. So the important part of that is that hydrogen is really a cost of electricity. And one other thing I always like to mention is I've so often found out when we talk about hydrogen, people visualize, especially when you use it in a car or so, that there's some hydrogen reactor or something. I think it's worthwhile spelling out that a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle it's an electric vehicle, be it a bus, truck, or car. And the hydrogen is just a supply point of the electrons. And another thing, hydrogen is a primary component of, for example, natural gas. It's CH4. 4 hydrogen molecules, 1 carbon. When you burn it, you get CO2 and water and energy. When you just burn hydrogen, you just get the energy and water, no CO2. So hydrogen has been the backbone of all our industry and all our transportation sectors all along. We're just replacing it with hydrogen without the CO2 component. Now the key again is that 75% of the cost of hydrogen is the cost of electricity. And that's a well-known fact. And the second thing is go big or go home. A small-scale electrolysis on with a small electrolyzer is just not cost-effective. So we're doing it on a very, very large scale. To put it in perspective, to my knowledge, currently the largest hydrogen facility operating is around 8-9 megawatt. There's a 20 megawatt project being constructed in Quebec, and we're going to 150 megawatt. It's a whole different ballgame. And as a result of that, we're getting into a cost of hydrogen that we can manufacture here in around $3.50 to $4 Canadian per kilogram at the electrolyzer. That gets to the point where we're getting close to the cost of diesel. And we think that's the enabling factor necessary to get hydrogen into the market in a major way. We need more stations that Colin has developed, like fueling stations. And you may have just heard, for example, recently the European community has taken a big step in the hydrogen direction. €9 billion have been earmarked just for the hydrogen infrastructure. The state of Bavaria, which is just one province, like a Canadian equivalent of Canada, they are going to put 100 fueling stations for hydrogen just into Bavaria. I don't know, I think in Canada we're below 10. So you can see there's we need to scale this up. But the problem is, in Europe, for example, particularly in Germany, they don't have the low-cost energy we have. So in Canada, we had a very unique situation. We have long distances, long transportation needs. We have clean energy. We have the technology. And now we also have the low-cost energy to make hydrogen cost-effective. So we think this is a big transition occurring. And it's a chicken and egg. What comes first? For example, you're not going to buy a hydrogen fuel cell car if you can't fuel it. I'm trying to drive one. I live in Victoria. Colin is just now in the final stages of getting a fueling station established. I couldn't have a car until I have that. So it's very important to build the infrastructure, and then the next most important thing is to be cost effective. If it costs 3 times as much as gasoline, then you're probably not going to do it. And the attraction of hydrogen, being able to fuel quickly, is very compelling. And again, hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, be it bus, truck, coach, whatever, it's an electric vehicle. It's just a different supply of the electrons. Either you get it through the grid, or you get it in the form of hydrogen. And then one more thing I think that's important to hear about hydrogen is that we have a huge infrastructure in place around the world in the form of a gas distribution network. So the best way to distribute and store hydrogen is to put it into the gas system. And once you reach a certain percentage, let's say 8 to 10% concentration of hydrogen in the gas system, then every gas supply point becomes a hydrogen supply point. You can take it out of the gas. So there's a transition about to occur here that's dramatic. We're now working with Enbridge and Fortis and several US utilities to enable the injection of hydrogen into the gas grid. And while it's difficult to predict the timeline, we like to think it's coming pretty soon, and that will enable hydrogen use in locations that today are just not able to be done, because the problem is always how to transport the hydrogen. The storage in the gas pipeline is tremendous, and that enables the low-cost energy sources like wind and solar and even hydro. We know sun doesn't work at night and wind doesn't always blow. So when you make electricity into hydrogen and put it in a gas pipeline, you have now transformed it from an electron that has to be normally consumed at the time of generation into something that can be stored and transported simultaneously. And when you look at the overall efficiency, taking the transportation and storage into account, hydrogen suddenly becomes very attractive compared to electricity.
Just to be clear, we're creating hydrogen from water, essentially. Is that correct? Where are we getting our hydrogen?
In water and electricity. And what you then do is you split the hydrogen and the water into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen goes in the air. Now, you also mentioned, we have the greenhouses. Unfortunately, the conversion of electricity into hydrogen is not without losses. So an electrolyzer will generate somewhere in the 20 to 25% of the energy will manifest itself as hot water. So we have a humongous amount of hot water, 40 megawatt. So we are in the process with First Nations to build very, very large greenhouses, which will take that energy and allow year-round operation of organic produce on a massive scale. So we're reusing the waste, and the benefits you're getting from having storage and transportation with hydrogen makes it overall very effective. You've got to look at so-called sector coupling. If you look at the whole ecosystem altogether, it becomes very effective. If you just take one component alone, you say, you lose energy converting electricity to hydrogen. Therefore, it's not as effective as putting electrons in a battery by charging. True. But look at the advantage you have. Try to do it at nighttime with solar. Doesn't work. Hydrogen, the storage component is really the Achilles heel, and that's often forgotten. And another problem is, the only reason why I don't drive an electric car at this point is, I don't have the patience to wait half an hour to charge a car when I go somewhere. I mean, for local commute, yes. But for longer distance, which we do a fair bit, it's just not practical. And the time required to charge a car. I mean, when I come to a gas station, there are two cars, I drive to the next one. The idea of having to wait half an hour to charge a car, I can't imagine. With hydrogen, it's no longer than fueling with gasoline.
Let's be fair, we could fuel electric vehicles overnight, right? We're going to get to Kara and her perception on this in a moment. I've got one last question for you guys. To a lot of Canadians, this is going to sound like voodoo. And untried and untested and scary, and hydrogen, I'm going to have hydrogen in my car. It's being done somewhere else, right? We're not. Canada doesn't like to be first at anything necessarily. Unfortunately
true, yeah. In Germany they have power-to-gas facilities where they take electricity, make hydrogen, inject it in the gas grid since 10 years. On a not very large scale yet, but it's done in many, many different locations. I've been to a number of them. And really there's nothing new. Also, one other interesting thing is, which is often forgotten, when you talk about hydrogen, up until the 60s, town gas was what was being distributed to municipalities around the world as a source of energy. Now it's natural gas. Town gas is 55% hydrogen. We've been there before.
So we've been doing this for a while.
It's just nobody's alive that was involved in those days. That stopped in the 60s. So hydrogen has been a major component.
Yeah, we really don't see that as a factor. You've got, as I say, thousands of these forklifts running around. You've got thousands of cars. The buses have been used for many years. The people's perception dissolves very, very quickly once they see a product from Toyota that is work and using every day. I mean, I take my kids in and it dissolves pretty quickly. So I do believe one of the importance of driving the light duty into the market is to change that perception of people. It's one of the benefits of doing that, or even transit buses, because it dissolves very, very quickly once people see the technology.
Yeah, I would just add, to the point of our colleagues raising here that it is actually in the industry already. Power to gas is already happening north of Toronto. Enbridge is already producing hydrogen from surplus power off the grid north of Toronto with a hydrogenics electrolyzer. And that's already happening in the community of Markham. So right there in that community, it's already being produced. And we have agencies, transit agencies around there, Mississauga, York region, looking at how we can transport it across the 401 highway to use for fuel cell buses. So in terms of it's live and it's real, Europe already has a massive European-wide joint initiative to procure hydrogen fuel cell buses. They're in phase 2. They've already done a large procurement and deployed the vehicles. And in California, loads of transit agencies have trialed out and now have operational hydrogen fuel cell buses. So it's just a bit of wonky history that we are leaders in hydrogen fuel cell tech in this country, and we don't have these vehicles out on the road ubiquitously, either in transit or automotive. It should be the case because it's not so much voodoo anymore. It's just us having wool over our own eyes.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's the thing. When we recorded this panel, our objective was to record for about an hour, thinking we could edit it down to 45 minutes. Instead, we ended up with a lively and compelling conversation that exceeded 2 hours, and with some difficulty culled it down to about 85 minutes, with these 4 exceptional people sharing their insights. And it's clear the clean transportation industry can be huge in Canada. It already employs the same number of people as our existing auto industry, but it has the opportunity to double, and more importantly, to expand across Canada. And because it's so important we understand this opportunity, we've decided to save the content and split it into 2 episodes. The second panel starts with Kara Claremont of Plug and Drive, Canada's leading expert on personal EVs, talking about how electric vehicle incentives basically don't cost the government anything and how EVs can save health budgets in a big way. The discussion then continues with a very engaging conversation on the employment opportunities across the entire sector, with all 4 of our panelists weighing in and critically sharing what various governments can do to help the sector thrive and so easily double our 262,800 existing jobs into clean transportation by 2030. Surprisingly, it's absolutely not what you think. To find out more, be sure to tune in to Canada's Clean Reset series, Clean Transportation Part 2, wherever you found this podcast, or at clean50.com. And whether you tune in or not, if you're part of that 58% of Canadians we know favor a climate-conscious post-COVID clean reset, you have to call your MP or write your MP and tell them so.
As Canadians, we're always told that the fossil fuel extraction industry is the beating heart of our economy. That's absolutely not true. And here's the other thing. $1 million invested in the fossil fuel industry produces just 2.7 jobs. $1 million invested in any of the clean reset programs on which we were suggesting that government focus produces somewhere between 5 and 20 jobs. Clean jobs, jobs of the future, and programs where taxpayer investment would typically be fully repaid to the government within 2 to 3 years. It's not just spending. Government can drive immediate jobs action by making some basic regulatory changes. The Clean50 CleanReset plan includes a broad range of ideas for government reset action, captured in a series of webcasts, podcasts, and videos, all featuring Clean50 award-winning experts. I encourage you to watch or listen to them all and get them from the same place where you consumed this one. More importantly, I'll ask you to do 2 other things. The first is to forward links to these videos to all of your elected officials. In particular, let's get MPs of all parties better educated on what the low carbon economy can look like for Canada, because many don't have a really good idea. The clean economy is durable, well-paid jobs that are not reliant upon the price of oil, as determined by Vladimir Putin or some Saudi sheikh. And the second thing is to send an email, or even better, make a phone call to your MP. Ask them to vote for a clean reset going forward. Tell them it's time to build a low-carbon Canada for the 21st century. For more information on the Clean50 and all our past award winners, please visit clean50.com. I'd like to thank the Trache Family Foundation and the Ivy Foundation for their incredible support, as well as that of our other sponsors, who contributed to making these casts possible. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'd like to thank you for contacting your MP. It's critical. Let's make sure that this time through we have a clean reset.